The golden morning sun filtered through the curtains as Mary stirred gently in bed, stretching one arm across the crisp sheets. It landed on nothing but air. Stephen's side was cold. Her brows furrowed softly. "He must have gone out early," she whispered, glancing at the time on her phone. 7:42 a.m. She smiled, reaching for the tray she'd prepared the night before. His favorite, fluffy pancakes, strawberries, and black coffee, just the way he liked it. Today was their 10th wedding anniversary. She had plans, simple ones, but meaningful. She wanted to spend the day walking through the park where they first met, revisit the little bookstore where he proposed. But as the minutes turned to hours, her smile faded into confusion. No message, no call, just silence. By noon, the pancakes had gone cold, the coffee untouched. Mary sat alone at the kitchen island, her perfectly styled hair now pinned back with frustration. She checked her phone again, tapping the screen repeatedly like it would magically show something new. Nothing. Her eyes darted to the door with every passing car, but Stephen didn't walk through it. A soft ache settled in her chest, one she couldn't yet name. "Maybe he's planning something," she said aloud, trying to reassure herself. Still, doubt crept in like a shadow under the door. She texted him, "Where are you?" Then another, "Happy anniversary, love." No response. The air felt heavier. The house, usually warm with love and laughter, felt empty. She looked at the breakfast tray and forced a laugh that broke halfway through. Maybe he overslept, just not here. But deep down, Mary knew. She felt it. Today wasn't going to go as planned. The sun had long climbed into the sky when Mary gave up pretending everything was fine. She picked up her phone with trembling fingers, pressed Stephen's contact, and listened to it ring. Once, twice, straight to voicemail. Her heart thudded. "Hi, it's me. Just call me when you can, okay?" she said softly, trying to keep her voice from cracking. She paced the living room in her robe, the cold floor against her bare feet a sharp contrast to the growing heat in her chest. She called again. This time no voicemail, no ring. Just silence. Her mind spiraled. Maybe he got into an accident. Maybe he left his phone in the car. Maybe no. The pit in her stomach told her it wasn't that simple. She scrolled through her messages, looking for a sign, any clue, but there was nothing. Just the stale, empty quiet of being forgotten. A soft chime interrupted her spiraling thoughts. A message from Cecilia flashed on her screen. "Saw Stephen at Tandoor Lounge last night. Looked like he was having a good time. Didn't know y'all were celebrating early." Mary's body went still, the air knocked out of her. She stared at the message, her chest rising and falling like waves crashing on a stormy shore. Her hands trembled as she typed, "With who?" But the response didn't come fast enough. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. "You weren't in an accident," she whispered bitterly. "You just didn't come home." She sank into the couch, hugging herself tightly, her breath shaky as the truth slithered around her like a tightening noose. Her anniversary morning had turned into a cruel performance, and she'd been the only one watching. It wasn't until 12:37 p.m. that Stephen walked through the door, sunglasses on, keys jingling in his hand, whistling faintly under his breath. The moment he saw Mary sitting at the dining table, motionless, his rhythm faltered. "Oh, hey, babe," he said too casually. "Didn't think you'd be home this early." Mary didn't reply. She studied him with eyes sharp and unreadable. "Where were you last night?" she asked quietly. Her voice wasn't raised, but there was a dangerous stillness to it. Stephen hesitated, scratched the back of his neck. I went out with some of the guys. You know, for the game. Lost track of time." She stood up slowly, walked to him, and brushed her lightly over his collar, where the faint smudge of red lipstick bloomed like a wound. Her fingers stilled. "Stephen," she whispered, "you smell like Chanel No. 5. The tension snapped like a live wire. Stephen stepped back, awkward, guilty. "It's probably from one of the girls at the bar. They hugged everyone goodbye, it wasn't." She cut him off with a bitter chuckle. "You're a terrible liar. You always have been." He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. "Mary, don't blow this out of proportion," he said, voice rising. "It was just one night. It didn't mean anything." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "You didn't even remember what today is." He opened his mouth, closed it. The realization hit him late. She nodded slowly. "Right, 10 years, Stephen. 10 years today, I woke up alone. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. She walked past him without another word, the scent of betrayal lingering stronger than any perfume. The dining table that evening was set out of habit. 2 plates, her salmon baked perfectly, his steak medium rare. The candlelight flickered between them, casting shadows across the silence. Mary moved her fork without eating, her eyes trained on the clink of Stephen's knife. He chewed slowly as if nothing was wrong. She couldn't understand it, how he could sit across from her like this, after breaking her heart, and expect her to carry on. "Did you enjoy your night?" she asked suddenly, her voice flat. Stephen blinked, caught off guard. "What do you want me to say?" he muttered. "That I regret it? That I'm sorry? You wouldn't believe me either way." Mary smiled thinly, her eyes hollow. "You're right. I wouldn't." Inside her mind, the dinner table blurred into snapshots of memories, laughter, clinking wine glasses, anniversary gifts wrapped in gold foil. Now the only thing wrapped was the lie she was slowly unfolding. She observed Stephen's face closely, the man she'd once memorized like poetry. Now he was a stranger in familiar skin. "Do you still love me, Stephen?" she asked, not because she wanted to hear it, but because she needed to know how far gone they were. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Of course I do," he replied. "We're just going through a rough patch." Her jaw tightened, her knuckles whitening against the silverware. "This isn't a rough patch. It's a crack through the center of everything." He sighed, annoyed. "So what now? You want a divorce over one mistake." She didn't respond. She simply stood, picked up her untouched plate, and walked it to the sink. Behind her, the silence screamed everything she wasn't ready to say. Not yet. The engine barely cooled before Mary stepped out of her car, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached the door to Arya's apartment. The door swung open almost instantly, as if Arya had been waiting. One look at Mary's pale face and red-rimmed eyes was all she needed. "He did it, didn't he?" Arya asked bluntly. Mary didn't respond. She just walked in, dropped her purse on the couch, and stood in the center of the room like a ghost. Arya sighed, closing the door. "Sit," she said gently, guiding her sister to the couch. "Tell me," Mary inhaled shakily. "He stayed out the entire night. Came back like nothing happened. Lipstick, perfume, lies." Arya's jaw tightened. "You're not going to sit there and pretend this didn't happen, are you?" Mary looked down at her hands. "I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, I'd figure it out. But the silence is louder than the betrayal." Arya stood, pacing. "You've forgiven too much already. You shrank yourself to fit into his version of love, and he repaid you with shame." Mary blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. "I thought maybe I was enough for him." Arya knelt in front of her, gripping her hands. "You are more than enough. You are a whole damn world, Mary. Don't you ever forget that." A heavy silence followed, interrupted only by Mary's quiet sob. "So what now?" she whispered. Arya's voice was firm. "Now you think for yourself. No guilt. No apologies. Just you." For the first time in days, Mary felt something stir inside her. Not rage, not despair, something clearer resolve. It was just after midnight when Stephen fell asleep, his back turned to her as if nothing had happened. Mary lay still for a long time, listening to the rhythm of his breath. Once it evened out, she slipped out of bed silently and tiptoed toward the dresser where he left his phone charging. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked it. He never changed his passcode. 4 digits, their wedding date. She almost laughed. As she opened his messages, the screen lit up with a recent chat. "Last night was unforgettable," followed by a heart emoji. Her stomach twisted. She opened the thread fully. Photos, a video, audio messages that made her feel sick. Laughter, whispered secrets. Plans to meet again. Mary scrolled until she couldn't bear to anymore. This wasn't a mistake, it was a full-blown betrayal, cultivated and nurtured like a second life. She backed out of the messages, heart thundering, and opened his email. Flight tickets, 2 of them. Dinner reservations under an alias she didn't recognize. Hotel confirmations. There was nothing accidental about it. Stephen had planned an entire evening while she folded his laundry and baked his favorite pie. She clenched the phone tightly in her fist, standing in the soft blue light of the hallway like a woman watching herself drown. She wanted to scream. break something, wake him and demand answers. But instead, she put the phone down gently, walked to the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "He doesn't deserve me," she whispered into the quiet. And the silence, for the first time, agreed with her. She didn't sleep that night, not because of sadness, but because her mind was already moving through every door she had never dared open. Until now. 2 days later, Mary stood in front of her closet, staring blankly at rows of dresses. None of them felt right. Too cheerful. Too forced. She finally chose a soft blue one and slipped it on, painting on a smile that felt foreign. Cecilia's baby shower was at the Westmore Garden Hall, a charming venue with pastel balloons and peonies in mason jars. Everyone was glowing, hugging, laughing. Mary smiled, nodded, and accepted compliments about how radiant she looked. But inside, she felt like glass. When Cecilia embraced her, Mary hesitated. "You doing okay?" Cecilia whispered into her ear. "You seem off," Mary forced a smile. "Just tired. You know how these anniversaries get." Cecilia, unaware of the chaos beneath the surface, laughed lightly. "You and Stephen are always the perfect couple." The words landed like needles. Perfect. If only they knew. Mary drifted from conversation to conversation, sipping on orange juice while others sipped champagne, faking laughs that never quite reached her eyes. One woman gushed about her husband, surprising her with a trip to Bali. Another spoke of how her partner cried during their baby's ultrasound. Mary stared at her hands and tuned it all out. The room felt like a gallery of what she'd once hoped her life would be. When Cecilia called her up to help open gifts, Mary politely declined. "I need to step out for some air," she said, grabbing her purse. Sighed, she leaned against the wall, gulping in the cool breeze like it was oxygen after drowning. Her phone buzzed. A message from Stephen. "Where are you? I need you to pick up detergent." Mary stared at it, lips trembling in a bitter smile. Not "how are you?" Not "I'm sorry." Just detergent. That was her worth now. She turned off her phone and didn't go back inside. Mary sat in her parked car outside their home, engine off, fingers gripping the steering wheel. Her eyes remained fixed on the front door, but her mind drifted somewhere far beyond it. Something inside her had finally clicked into place, a quiet detachment that wasn't born from anger, but clarity. She no longer cared to confront Stephen. Words would only loop in circles, and she had no interest in pleading for what should have been hers all along. Honesty. That evening, after Stephen went out for drinks with the guys, she sat at the dining table with her laptop open. A blank Google search bar blinked back at her. She typed in, "real estate agents near me." Her heart didn't pound, her hands didn't shake. It felt peaceful. She scheduled a private consultation under her maiden name, listing the house as discreet interest in selling. Then she opened another tab, one-way flights to Portugal. She closed the laptop just before Stephen returned. He smelled of whiskey and someone else's perfume, but she no longer flinched. "You still up?" he asked, kicking off his shoes. "Couldn't sleep," she replied without looking up from a book she wasn't reading. When he kissed her on the cheek out of habit, she didn't move. Her body had already begun leaving, even if her feet hadn't followed yet. That weekend, while he watched football with a beer in hand, she messaged her childhood friend in Lisbon, the one who had once begged her to visit, thinking of taking a break. "Can we talk?" she typed. A minute later, he replied, "Always. I've got room if you need it." She smiled faintly, a flicker of light in her hollow chest. The plan had begun, and not even Stephen's obliviousness could stop it. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't break plates. She would simply disappear, like morning fog under the rising sun. On Monday, Mary began packing, quietly, methodically. One box at a time, starting with things that wouldn't raise suspicion. Off-season clothes, old books. A framed photo of her late father that Stephen never noticed had moved. She stacked the boxes neatly in the back of her closet, each one marked with vague labels, storage, donations to be sorted. Stephen barely noticed. He came and went, absorbed in work, sports, and his secret life, oblivious to the subtle emptiness that was beginning to swallow their home. Mary never rushed. She moved like a woman cleaning a room after a funeral, no tears, no noise, just reverence for what was lost. With every garment folded and every drawer emptied, she whispered in her head, "This is for every time you lied to my face. Every time I believed you. In the evenings, she'd make dinner like nothing had changed. They still shared a table, still exchanged mundane pleasantries, but her eyes no longer lingered on him. Her thoughts were on rental agreements and embassy appointments. One afternoon, she took her mother's deed out of the filing cabinet and made arrangements for it to be leased through an agency. It would serve as passive income abroad, enough to keep her afloat while she figured out her next steps. When Stephen asked why her jewelry box was missing, she said it had been sent for polishing. He nodded, barely curious. She even sent herself a few courier packages to create the illusion of clutter. It was almost poetic. The man who never paid attention couldn't see what was being taken from under his nose. When she stared at the half-packed living room, she thought to herself, one more week. Just 7 more days, and I'll be gone. For once, she was no longer afraid. The only question that remained was how to leave without a single goodbye. The cafe was tucked away in a quiet corner of town, one Mary had visited only once before. She wore dark glasses, her curls tucked beneath a scarf, and introduced herself under a fabricated name when she sat across from the woman who had unknowingly stolen her peace. "You must be Bianca," the woman said, her voice smooth, her smile too wide. "Stephen told me you'd be helping me with the event planning." Mary nodded. "That's right, he mentioned you two were close." The mistress, young, polished, and blissfully ignorant, giggled like a schoolgirl. "Oh, more than close. We're practically inseparable lately. He's just different with me, you know?" Mary stirred her coffee slowly, the spoon scraping the edge of the ceramic cup. "Different how?" she asked coolly. "He listens. He's gentle. He says I make him feel alive again." Mary smiled, a tight curve of her lips. "And his wife?" she asked, feigning curiosity. The woman waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, they're done. He said she's cold, distant. They don't even sleep in the same bed anymore." Mary swallowed the bitter taste in her mouth. "And the house? Do you see yourself living there?" The woman's eyes sparkled. "I've already picked out a paint color for the guest room. Can you imagine?" Mary's gaze didn't waver. She nodded, stood, and said softly, "Thank you for your time." As she walked away, she didn't look back. Outside, her lungs expanded as though she had been holding her breath for years. That woman had no idea, and neither did Stephen. But soon they both would. Mary wasn't broken anymore. She was becoming dangerous in silence. The clock on the bedside table blinked 2:47 a.m. Mary hadn't slept. She lay still on her side of the bed, listening to Stephen's soft, rhythmic snoring beside her. The room was cloaked in shadows, the only light coming from the soft blue glow of the street lamp through the curtains. Her eyes were fixed on the ceiling, but her mind was far from still. Her heart was tired, but her thoughts raced, flashes of laughter that once meant something, now echoes of deception. She turned to face him, studying the shape of his jaw, the faint scar near his brow from their hiking trip years ago. Once upon a time, she'd trace it with her fingertip as he whispered promises in the dark. Now, she felt only detachment. She was lying next to a stranger who wore her husband's skin. Slowly, she leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have no idea what you've lost." The words floated into the night, unheard. She blinked back tears, not out of pain anymore, but out of mourning. Mourning the version of herself who waited for him, who stayed faithful through lonely weekends and cold dinners, who believed love was patient and pain was part of the package. That woman was dying, quietly, beside a man who wouldn't notice until she was gone. She slipped out of bed and walked barefoot to the kitchen. The silence echoed louder there, like a cathedral of grief. She stood by the sink, wrapping her arms around herself as she whispered again, firmer this time, "You don't deserve me." And for the first time, she truly believed it. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she began her goodbye, not with words, but with the final, quiet resolve of a woman who'd stopped waiting to be loved properly. The phone vibrated on the kitchen counter just after lunch, flashing a message from the real estate agent. Offer accepted. Final papers signed. Funds to be transferred this week. Mary stared at the screen, then slowly set the phone down, her hands braced on the countertop. It was done. The house, their house, was no longer hers. The walls that once held their laughter, their fights, their marriage. It was all sold away like furniture in a closing sale. She felt no regret, just finality. Later that day, she visited her attorney to finalize the legal transfer under her maiden name. Stephen hadn't noticed the changed bank accounts or that the home documents had been moved from the shared folder. That's the thing about people who don't look closely. They never realize what's gone until it's far too late. That evening, as Stephen sat in the living room watching a basketball game, Mary walked past him with her passport folder tucked beneath her coat. "I'm stepping out for a bit," she said casually. "Need anything?" He waved her off, not even turning his head. "Maybe some chips if you're swinging by the store." She smiled faintly. "Sure." Outside, she exhaled deeply and drove to the visa service office. She submitted the final paperwork and booked her fingerprint appointment for the following week. Her destination, Lisbon, quiet, uncomplicated. Far enough that Stephen would never trace her unless she allowed it. When she returned home an hour later, he was asleep on the couch, a beer bottle balanced on his chest. She walked past him like he was a piece of decor. Upstairs, she sat by the window, lit by moonlight, and texted her friend abroad. "I'm coming. For real this time." The email arrived just past midnight. The subject line, "Long time, Mare." Her heart stuttered at the old nickname. Only one person ever called her that. Joshua, the boy with the quick smile and too much heart who once swore he'd marry her if Stephen ever messed up. They hadn't spoken in years, not because they fell out, but because life had scattered them in different directions. Mary clicked open the message, fingers trembling. "I heard through Cecilia that you're considering Lisbon. If that's true, I want you to know you won't be alone here. I have space. I have time. And I still have your favorite coffee waiting." A laugh slipped through her lips, surprising her. It was small, but it was real. She replied slowly, each word typed with care. "I'm coming. Not sure what happens after, but I'm finally ready to start over. Thank you, Josh, for remembering me." His response came moments later. "I never forgot you. I just respected your silence. When you land, I'll be there." She closed the laptop and sat in the quiet, her chest lighter than it had been in weeks. Joshua was more than an old friend. He was a mirror of the person she used to be before marriage molded her into someone else. And now, with everything crumbling behind her, the thought of seeing a familiar face, not tainted by betrayal, brought comfort. She walked over to her closet and pulled out a small leather bag, one she hadn't used in years. She began packing it with essentials, not like a woman running away, but like someone stepping forward. Lisbon wasn't just an escape, it was a return to herself. It was the kind of Sunday that used to mean slow breakfasts and fresh flowers on the table. But Stephen was in a different rhythm now. He straightened the pillows on the couch, sprayed cologne across the living room like it was enough to cover the dust of betrayal. "You'll like it here," he said, as he watched her pull up through the window. The door opened and the mistress, Cassie, walked in like she already belonged. "Oh, it's just as you described," she chirped, spinning slowly in the foyer, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "So this is where the magic happens." Stephen chuckled, though his smile was tighter than usual. "Yeah, something like that," he replied. Cassie dropped her overnight bag by the stairs without asking where to place it. She kissed him softly and asked, "Will this house ever feel like mine?" Stephen paused for a moment before answering, unsure why the question unsettled him. "Eventually," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. She moved around the house, poking into corners, humming to herself as if redecorating in her head. He watched her carefully. She was young, vibrant, a sharp contrast to Mary's calm elegance. But as Cassie giggled while exploring the bedroom, Stephen felt something flicker in his gut. The silence in the house had changed. It wasn't empty, it was hollow. Cassie turned to him. "Do you still think about her?" He hesitated. "We haven't really spoken," he lied. Cassie smiled, curling her arms around his neck. "Good. I don't like sharing." He nodded, pulling her in for a kiss, but his eyes drifted past her, toward the hallway where Mary used to leave handwritten notes for him every morning. There were none now, just a clean wall and the quiet hum of a woman playing house in someone else's place. Mary returned earlier than planned, stepping quietly into the house just as dusk wrapped its fingers around the neighborhood. The silence greeted her like an old friend. Stephen was in the kitchen, startled by the sound of the door. "You're back," he asked, closing the fridge. You didn't say when. She set her purse down, her voice steady. I thought I'd surprise you. That night, she cooked. Not because she wanted to, but because it was the kind of gesture he'd never forget if he had the capacity to feel guilt. She made oxtail stew and yam porridge, his favorites. When she set the table, Stephen looked impressed. What's the occasion? He asked. Nothing special, she replied, sitting across from him. Just thought we could share a meal. For old time's sake. They ate slowly, the clink of cutlery louder than conversation. After a while, she leaned back and asked, Do you love her? He froze, fork midair. Mary, it's a question, not a trap, she interrupted gently. He looked down. I don't know. It's different. She nodded. Different doesn't mean better. He sighed. You've been distant too, you know. Her brow arched. So that's your justification? I cooked for you. I was faithful. I waited. But because I got quiet, you got comfortable breaking me? He looked away, shame shadowing his features. I didn't mean to hurt you. She tilted her head. But you did. After clearing the dishes, she walked upstairs without another word, leaving him to stew in the silence he had earned. It was the last dinner they would ever share. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning arrived without ceremony. Birds chirped outside, and the kettle hissed on the stove. Mary moved with purpose, her suitcase zipped, the closet stripped of her essence. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't sad, but because the tears had dried up weeks ago. Before leaving, she wrote 2 letters. One was addressed to the housekeeper, Rosa, and left neatly on the counter. The other, meant for Stephen, was tucked beneath the glass fruit bowl where she knew Rosa would find it once the house settled back into its routine. She stared at the walls one last time, breathing in the scent of a home she no longer belonged to. Her fingers brushed lightly over the armrest of the couch where so many late-night conversations once bloomed. Goodbye, she whispered. You won't hear it from me again. As she stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds like a curtain parting on a new stage. Rosa arrived just as Mary was wheeling her luggage down the path. You leaving for your sisters? Rosa asked, squinting. Mary paused. Something like that, she answered softly. She handed her a key and motioned toward the kitchen. There's a letter. For him. Don't give it to him until after I'm gone. Not a moment sooner. Rosa hesitated, confused, but nodded. Is everything all right? Mary offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It will be. She got into the cab and didn't look back, not even once. As the car pulled away, the house faded into the rearview mirror like an old chapter finally turning its last page. What Stephen would wake up to was emptiness. What Mary had stepped into was freedom. Stephen woke with a stretch and a groggy smile, expecting the scent of fresh coffee or the soft footsteps of Mary humming in the hallway. But the house was still, too still. He sat up and rubbed his eyes. Mary, he called out lazily. No answer. He wandered into the kitchen, expecting a note or at least breakfast on the counter. Instead, there was silence, and half the dishes were gone. He opened the fridge. Empty. No eggs, no milk, not even her favorite yogurt. Confused, he moved through the house. The bedroom closet had a haunting echo. Her clothes, her scarves, even the photo frame by her bedside were missing. His fingers hovered over the empty space like they'd been burned. No, she didn't, he muttered, rushing downstairs. On the kitchen counter was a letter, neatly sealed with his name. He tore it open with trembling hands, unfolding it like a man bracing for a storm. Stephen, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I didn't want a fight or a farewell. I wanted freedom, and now I have it. I watched you walk away from us one night, but I'm walking away from you for good. Not in anger, but in peace. Don't look for me. His knees buckled slightly as he leaned against the counter, heart pounding. Panic spread across his chest like wildfire. He grabbed his phone and dialed her number. Disconnected. He opened his banking app. Her name no longer appeared on their joint account. He checked the deed. Transferred. His breath came in short, shallow gasps as the weight of her absence set in. He wasn't left. He was erased. And that was far worse than any slammed door. Stephen burst into Arya's apartment like a man possessed, his voice cracking as he demanded, "Where is she?" Arya didn't flinch. She sipped her tea, legs crossed, expression unreadable. "Good morning to you too, Stephen." His voice rose. "I know she talks to you. Tell me where she went. Arya stood, finally meeting his eyes with cold clarity. I don't know where she is, and if I did, I wouldn't tell you. You don't deserve her trail. He looked stunned, as if betrayed. I'm her husband, he barked. Exactly, Arya snapped. You were her husband. You don't get to act panicked now that she finally woke up. His mouth opened, but the words died. He had no defense, only regret. Next, he tried Cecilia. Her voice was soft, almost sad when he called. Mary didn't tell me much, she said quietly. Only that she was tired. He asked if she knew where Mary went. Somewhere better, was all she offered. Even Mary's mother, once polite despite the tension, slammed the door in his face before he could utter a word. She should have left you years ago, she hissed. Be thankful she did it with grace. Stephen stumbled back from each door like a man scraping pieces of himself off every stoop. He returned home to an echo, not a house. The mistress was gone for the weekend. He had asked her for space, unsure why. He collapsed onto the couch and stared at the ceiling, the silence heavy, suffocating. Everyone around Mary had known she would leave someday. He was the only one foolish enough to think she never would. Cassie returned Monday morning, humming as she walked in, a small suitcase in tow and an iced coffee in hand. I brought almond milk this time, she said cheerfully. Thought we could try it with pancakes. Stephen sat in the living room, eyes vacant, body unmoving. She leaned down and kissed his cheek. You okay? You look like you haven't slept. He didn't respond. Cassie wandered into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and frowned. Did Mary clean out the place before she left? Stephen finally spoke, his voice hoarse. She sold it. Cassie froze. Wait, what? He looked at her. She sold the house. I don't own it anymore. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean you don't own it? He stood up, voice flat. I mean she took back everything that was hers. This house, my piece, all of it. Cassie let out a sharp laugh, though it didn't reach her eyes. Well, maybe this is good. We can start fresh, build something together. You said you wanted that, right? Stephen stared at her, but saw nothing of the woman he thought he was choosing. Her voice, her perfume, even her laugh felt intrusive now. He walked past her and opened the cabinet where Mary used to keep the chamomile tea. Empty. We can get new things, Cassie added, trying to sound optimistic. Paint the walls, buy a new bed, make it ours. He turned slowly, eyes tired. You think paint will fix this? She narrowed her gaze. You're still thinking about her, aren't you? He didn't answer. Because in that moment, it became painfully clear Cassie was a choice made in delusion. Mary had been his home. And now all he had left was a house filled with someone else's voice. The walls seemed to close in with every passing hour. Stephen's days blurred into nights, and sleep no longer came easily. Even when he closed his eyes, Mary haunted him, her quiet grace, the way she used to set her tea down with a soft clink, how she'd touch his shoulder during the weather forecast without saying a word. Now those simple gestures echoed louder than arguments. One night, while sitting alone in the kitchen, he opened her drawer out of habit, the one where she kept scented candles and folded linen napkins. It was empty, like everything else she left behind. His hand trembled as he reached for the counter, gripping it to stay grounded. "What have I done?" he murmured aloud, his voice barely holding together. The kitchen light flickered as though answering him, and suddenly he sank to the floor. He wept loud, guttural sobs that reverberated through the hollow house. There were no ears left to hear him, no comforting hand to rest on his back. Just silence and the hum of a refrigerator that didn't care. The grief wasn't just for the loss of Mary. It was for the version of himself he had carelessly abandoned. The husband who once came home just to see her smile. The man who forgot what loyalty meant in pursuit of something shinier. Cassie called multiple times that night, but he ignored them all. He didn't want her voice. He didn't want anyone's. For the first time, the weight of his betrayal truly sank in, not as guilt, but as devastation. He had not just lost Mary, he had broken her. And in doing so, he had fractured something sacred within himself, too. Desperation drove Stephen to the immigration office the following morning. He wore his only clean button-down and clutched a folder with Mary's old travel documents. The woman behind the glass looked unimpressed as he leaned in and said, "My wife is missing. I need to know if she's left the country." The clerk barely raised her eyes. "You need a police report. And even then, we don't disclose travel logs without court clearance. He swallowed. I'm not trying to hurt her. I need to know where she went. The woman blinked. Sir, if she left willingly, that's not our concern. The words hit harder than expected. He left the building feeling like someone had slammed a door in his chest. On the drive home, he called a private investigator. I need you to find someone for me, he said. No questions asked. 3 days passed, then the call came. She's out of the country, the investigator confirmed. Lisbon, name's no longer tied to yours. New address forwarded to a lawyer's office. Nothing else. Stephen sat at the edge of the bed, phone pressed to his ear. So that's it, he asked numbly. That's all you have? The man on the other end paused. That's all she left behind. Whatever she planned, she did it well. When the line went dead, Stephen stared at the floor, completely still. She had really done it, left the country, erased her trail, severed the bond. He was grasping at shadows. She hadn't just left physically. She had exited his world, his reach, his control. And the terrifying part? He realized she didn't do it out of anger. She did it with purpose. And purpose was far more permanent than rage. Stephen spent hours that night combing through their photo albums, something he hadn't done in years. The pictures documented every phase of their lives, birthdays, anniversaries, quiet vacations, lazy Sundays in matching pajamas. There she was, smiling at him through time, her eyes never fully lit, not in the way he thought. He picked up a photo of them at the waterfall resort. They looked happy, posed with matching towels around their shoulders. But when he looked closely, Mary's hand wasn't resting in his. It hovered, floating just slightly apart. That image stuck with him more than the others. That slight hesitation in her fingers. That space between them invisible but vast. She was already drifting, he muttered, even back then. He walked to the bookshelf where Mary had kept her journals. Most were gone. Only one remained, hidden between 2 cookbooks. He hesitated before opening it, unsure if he had the right. But curiosity overrode guilt. Inside were dated entries, short reflections, written in her small, steady handwriting. Today he forgot the soup I spent hours on. Didn't notice the haircut either. Another, I wonder if silence is safer than truth. And then one that made his knees weaken. If I ever leave, it won't be because I hate him. It'll be because I finally remembered how to love myself. He clutched the journal to his chest, breath shaking. Mary had never screamed. She had never cursed. But here, in quiet ink, she had left a thunderous truth. He had never truly seen her, and now she was gone because someone else would. A light drizzle tapped gently against the glass as Mary sipped her espresso from a quiet cafe tucked between narrow Lisbon streets. She looked different now, calmer, grounded. Her curls framed her face naturally, and she wore no makeup. Across from her sat Joshua, looking older than she remembered, but his eyes were just as warm. You haven't changed, he said with a soft smile. Mary chuckled, stirring her drink. That's a lie, and we both know it. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Okay, maybe you've changed, but in all the best ways. You seem untethered. She tilted her head. That's because I am. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the city buzz around them. He broke it gently. Is it too soon to ask what happened? Mary hesitated, her fingers tightening around the cup. He forgot who I was. And then I remembered. Joshua nodded, understanding something without needing the details. You don't owe me the story, just the truth of how you are now. Mary exhaled slowly. I'm healing. It's strange. Some mornings I wake up and expect to hear him brushing his teeth. And then I realize I'm free. Joshua's eyes softened. And what will you do with that freedom? She smiled faintly. I think I'll build something new from the ground up this time. He reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. Then let me help. There was no romantic pressure in his voice, only the sincerity of a man who had once loved her quietly and never stopped caring. Mary blinked, surprised by the emotion that rose in her throat. You were always the safe place, Josh, she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. Now let me be the start. They sat on a stone bench by the river that evening, watching the lights from boats shimmer across the water. Joshua turned to her, the breeze lifting his collar. I meant it earlier, he said. I want to help you rebuild. I have a space at my company, community consulting, flexible hours. It's nothing flashy, but it's yours if you want it. Mary's eyebrows lifted. You'd really do that for me, he nodded. I'm not offering this out of pity. I know your worth, and I know what you've survived. That kind of strength belongs on a team. She looked away briefly, the weight of being offered something without strings tugging at her chest. I don't even know who I am anymore, she murmured. Then this is the perfect place to figure it out, he said. Mary was silent, her eyes following a small ferry in the distance. Back home, I was invisible, even to myself. I don't want to be that woman again. Joshua's voice was gentle. Then be whoever you want now. You don't owe your old life a single day more. She turned to face him, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. All right, she said finally, her voice firm. I'll take the job. His grin was immediate, boyish. Then welcome aboard, Mary Obiora. They both laughed, the sound unfamiliar yet comforting. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment it didn't matter. She had work to do, not for a man, not for a marriage, but for herself. And that made all the difference. Back home, Cassie stood in the middle of the bedroom, arms crossed, watching Stephen dress in silence. He hadn't spoken more than a few words to her all week. She tried soft gestures, cooking his favorite meals, lighting candles, even wearing the silk robe he once admired. None of it worked. You've been a ghost since she left, she snapped finally. Stephen didn't look at her as he buttoned his shirt. I don't want to talk about this. Cassie walked toward him, her voice rising. You said you wanted a life with me. That Mary was the past. Was that all just a distraction? Was I just a distraction? He turned slowly, eyes cold. I didn't think she'd leave. I didn't expect her to vanish like I never mattered. Cassie's face crumpled, a mix of rage and vulnerability. So you're punishing me because she had the strength to walk away? Stephen scoffed, grabbing his keys. I'm punishing myself. She stepped in front of the door, blocking him. Tell me the truth. If she walked back in right now, would you leave with her? His silence gave her the answer. Her voice cracked. You'll never love me the way you loved her, will you? He didn't reply. Instead, he stepped around her and left the room without another word. Cassie sank onto the edge of the bed, heart pounding. The truth had finally surfaced, and it tasted bitter. She wasn't the reward. She was the consequence. And nothing she did would ever change that. Stephen knocked on Arya's door again, this time without the rage he'd carried the first time. He looked smaller now, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled, his shoulders hunched like a man aging under the weight of his own mistakes. Arya opened the door slowly, arms folded across her chest. Didn't expect to see you again, she said flatly. I need answers, he said, barely above a whisper. I know you know where she went. Arya studied him for a long moment, her gaze sharp and unforgiving. Then she turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open. Stephen stepped in cautiously. Please, he said, I can't sleep. I can't think. I don't even recognize myself anymore. Arya poured herself a glass of water, took a long sip, then finally replied, She sold the house. With her own hands, quietly, legally, efficiently. And she did it without you noticing, because she had to. Stephen sank into a chair, eyes wide. She really planned all of this. Without me even seeing it? Arya sat across from him. You didn't see a lot of things, Stephen. That's why she left. He dropped his head into his hands. I thought she was just upset. I didn't think she'd leave the country. Arya's voice softened, not out of pity, but clarity. She didn't run away. She walked out. There's a difference. He looked up, hollow-eyed. Is she okay? Arya paused. Better than okay. She's healing. He nodded slowly, the words sinking in like stones. She used to tell me she felt invisible, he muttered. Arya stood. That's because you were always looking past her. She didn't offer comfort or forgiveness. She simply opened the door. You got the truth you came for. Now go live with it. Stephen stood in the middle of what used to be their bedroom, now stripped of softness and scent. He opened a bottle of whiskey and drank straight from it, sitting heavily on the edge of the bed. His phone buzzed. Cassie again. He tossed it aside. She had started calling every day now, asking questions he had no answers for. The more he drank, the clearer things became, and that clarity hurt more than the confusion ever did. He had destroyed something beautiful. And for what? The fleeting thrill of attention. The illusion of freedom? He thought about apologizing again, writing a letter, even flying to Lisbon. But what would he say that she hadn't already heard in silence? His redemption wasn't hers to grant. She owed him nothing. He stopped going to work. The firm called twice before giving up. His inbox filled with unread emails. Friends stopped reaching out. Even his mother asked, "What have you done, Stephen?" And the shame in her voice had driven him deeper into isolation. The house became a museum of loss. Framed photos still hung on the walls, but they felt more like ghosts than memories. One night, he found himself talking to her out loud. "You used to hum when you cooked," he whispered to the air. "You always smelled like vanilla and rose water." He ran a hand through his hair. "I miss the way you looked at me when you believed I was good." But the silence offered no absolution, only the echo of a man unraveling in the ruins of his own choices. Mary walked along the coast just after dawn, her sandals brushing through the sand, the sky tinged with soft peach and lavender hues. The waves kissed her ankles, cold but grounding. With each breath, she felt a little more whole. Lisbon was quiet this morning, peaceful, the kind of quiet that healed rather than haunted. She paused and looked out over the ocean, thinking not of Stephen, but of herself, of the girl she had once been, and the woman she was becoming. "I carried so much," she whispered to no one, "so much that didn't belong to me." Her voice didn't tremble. It was a release. She crouched down and traced a line in the wet sand, letting the tide erase it slowly, just like her grief. Later, she sat with a small notebook at a cafe table overlooking the harbor. She didn't write about pain this time. She wrote about the books she wanted to read, the things she wanted to learn, the art class she was considering. She smiled to herself. For the first time in years, her future was hers alone. The couple passed by, laughing, holding hands. Mary didn't ache watching them. Instead, she wished them well in her heart. She had stopped resenting love. She simply knew what she deserved now. And if it came again, it would have to meet her where she stood, unapologetically whole, no longer shrinking to fit into someone else's story. She looked up at the sun breaking through the clouds and whispered to herself, "I survived. And that's enough for now." The package came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Mary stood at her apartment door, uncertain whether to take it inside. Something about the handwriting, slanted, tense, familiar, made her stomach tighten. She placed it on her desk, untouched for hours, sipping tea as if waiting for it to vanish on its own. But curiosity eventually won. Inside was a single envelope, thick with folded pages. Her name was written carefully across the front. "No dear, no my love, just Mary." She opened it slowly, heart steady, and began to read. "I have no excuse. I thought I had time. I thought you'd always be there, forgiving me one more time. I was wrong. You were never mine to lose. You were your own person all along. I see that now." Mary's eyes didn't blur. She kept reading, absorbing the remorse line by line. Stephen had written not to beg, not to blame, but to acknowledge. "You left with dignity. You left in silence. That was your final kindness, and I will never forget it." He recounted small memories, how she once sewed a missing button on his shirt before he even noticed it was gone. How her laughter used to fill the car when they drove aimlessly through the city at night. "I hope someone sees you now the way I never did. Completely, clearly, as enough." Mary closed the letter gently, pressing her palm against the last page. She didn't cry, she didn't smile. She just breathed and placed the letter in a drawer. She owed him nothing more. Closure had never required a reply. The morning air was crisp as Mary stepped out onto her small balcony, a fresh journal in hand and a steaming cup of tea resting beside her. The city below yawned awake, vendors setting up stalls, children chasing pigeons, the river glowing gold beneath the rising sun. She felt the warmth on her face and tilted her head back, eyes closed. There was no rush, no plan she had to bend herself around. For the first time in years, her life belonged only to her. She flipped open the journal to the first page and began writing, not to anyone else, but to herself. "Today is mine, not because something big happened, but because I chose peace." Later that afternoon, she met Joshua at a park cafe. He grinned when he saw her, handing her a warm pastry. "You look different," he said. She laughed softly, tearing a piece of bread. "That's because I am." They talked about work, weekend markets, maybe signing up for a cooking class together. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was safe, steady, something real. As they parted ways, he paused and looked back. "You're glowing, Mare." She smiled, touched her collarbone lightly, and replied, "That's what happens when you stop carrying what was never yours." That night, she stood by her window, watching Lisbon shimmer. She didn't know if she'd fall in love again, but she knew now that love would never again cost her herself. And that was more than enough to begin again. Here's the Bible verse for the story, Proverbs 31, verse 25. She clothed herself in strength and dignity, and when the silence came, she did not break, she walked away with peace, and the days ahead did not frighten her. This verse reflects Mary's quiet resilience, her decision to leave not in vengeance, but with grace, and her courage to walk into an unknown future with faith and self-worth. Moral of the story: sometimes strength isn't found in loud goodbyes or broken dishes. It's found in quiet exits, steady steps, and the decision to choose yourself after being forgotten by someone you gave everything to. Healing begins the moment you stop waiting to be seen and start seeing yourself. This moral reinforces the story's core message: dignity in departure, freedom in self-worth, and peace in choosing healing over revenge. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.